back, everybody. Psychedelics Today, our Friday episodes. Excited to have you here. How's it going, Joe?
Going great here. A lot of snow, a lot of fires, but thankfully the smoke all went away, for at least where I live. So that's nice. But it's cool to see the snow outside. Yeah. And you're having some kind of hot weather, right? Are you in the 90s or something over there?
I walked outside today. It seemed pretty humid, but I think it's like low 80s still. Yeah. Not bad.
Oh, not bad. Not bad. Yeah. Cool. So, I guess before we dig in, let's say a word about navigating psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. We've got, less than 10 spots left as of Wednesday for our later spot that starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 5 p.m. Mountain. It'll run 8 weeks, starts September 17. Just had a great chance to catch up with a student to record a testimonial for it. And he's like, this is just a great foundations course. Like, you don't know that you want to spend, $50,000 to get a transpersonal psych degree or more. So like, what should you do first? Let's start with some low-hanging fruit, get some fundamental theories under your belt, get a better orientation for the field so you can better orient yourself. So like observe the field, orient, and then act. What is that? Observe, orient, decide, act. Yeah, that's it. And it's a really important thing. Like if you're going to make huge decisions that cost you years of your life and tens of thousands of dollars, why not get a little bit of a foundation first before you dig deeper?
Where's the wisdom there?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of doctors out there. I have a veterinarian friend who said, you know what? I really just wanted to be a farmer and have time with animals. I didn't necessarily need to go to vet school to do that at all. In fact, I could have been a lot happier and been saddled with a lot less debt if I kind of understood my wants a little bit better. So, yeah, it's all about self-knowledge. And like this course can kind of help you with that, give you some tools to orient and reflect on, why do you really want to get involved? Like what kind of program do you need to go to? Like, do you need to go to 1 to 2 year program, or are you cool with like a short ketamine training that's like 5 days or something, And there's a lot of options out there, right? Medicinal mindfulness to Kriya, to Prati, to CIIS, to MAPS, and more. There's more and more training becoming available all the time. I think we're going to keep expanding our training offerings, but we don't necessarily need to do what they're all doing because they're already doing it. Why copy? So we're going to do it in our own way. And this is what we're doing with navigating psychedelics for clinicians and therapists. It's our lived experience in this space, what we've learned from our masters and mentors like Groff and Lenny and many more. And yeah, just a beautiful thing. So we've sold I can't even do math right now, 25 plus 15, 35, I guess, something like that, maybe 40 spots. And only 10 left. So if you want to join us, psychedeliceducationcenter.com for more, and feel free to reach out and ask us questions. Psychedelics Today, email@gmail.com. Anything else you want to add there on the class, Kyle?
No, I just also want to pitch the Imagination as Revelation class. So if you haven't checked that out yet, definitely go over to psychedeliceducationcenter.com and check that out. Deep dive into Jungian psychology and the psychedelic experience. So if you want to learn a little bit more from the depth tradition, depth-oriented psychology, definitely worth checking out. Johanna did a wonderful job with this course, and got a lot of great feedback already. People are hungry for more. And so I think that kind of speaks volume of the importance of depth-oriented work in the psychedelic space. So excited to hopefully create more content within the depth-oriented field.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot left to be explored with depth psychology. And this is a really great, kind of first touch with it for us. Really happy with what you and Johanna have been able to do, and just hope you can keep doing more with her and others that are in that tradition. It's like a hard step, right? Like we want to go, okay, it's all about studies. And it's like, well, there's so much missed in science, and it's really hard and expensive and a really 100-year project to have that kind of certainty that people want, maybe thousands of years of a project,
right.
But how do we understand that? It's like, well, we just started getting neuroscience like data on brain imaging, on psychedelics. So like, these things have been around for thousands of years, and we only have got like 10, 20 years max of brain imaging data.
Yeah.
And what does that really tell us? I think Groff tells us a lot more. Carl Jung, a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're thinking about the experiential component of a psychedelic, like, and here comes my biases of kind of depth-oriented. It's like you're dealing with psyche. Neuroscience doesn't speak the language of psyche. It's very reductionist. And so, when you're trying to really navigate what the hell just went on there, I mean, yeah, it's great to understand what the default mode network is and kind of view it from that perspective. But, maybe on a deeper level, something else is trying to speak to you. And, do you have that archetypal language, that language to work with image and symbols and metaphor and analogy and all that stuff? So I don't know. I'm obviously interested in that. And I think I like to explore that stuff. Not to bash neuroscience. Yeah. I also really appreciate neuroscience. And I think it's helpful to understand, the connection of the brain and body. And obviously I draw a lot on that from some of my somatic work as well, talking about the nervous system and how all that's interconnected. So
yeah. Yeah, and I think like our orientation is such that we don't think brain equals mind or like brain equals psyche. Our picture of mind is much bigger, or psyche is much different than just brain and images and whatnot. But, neuroscience has given us a ton. Brain imaging has given us a ton. Like, why not understand it? Like, I'm not afraid to do that. It's thought I had, I think, just yesterday is what has been most helpful for healing people so far. And if we want to just take our area of psychedelics, like I think, the depth traditions, the indigenous traditions, and have been probably the most helpful. Like I think a lot of these early people in the psychedelic world, like Humphrey Osmond and whatnot, like had a lot of depth training, post-Freudian depth psychology work, because that was really all there was, the only show in town for a while. Yeah. And they had amazing results. And, does a behaviorist get better results than a Jungian? Great question to ask. I don't know the answer, but just ask that question, or does it even matter? I guess the Jungian could be a total asshole and the behaviorist could be a lot more compassionate and lovable. So just that kind of working relationship could just be the bridge. Anyway, that's quite the tangent.
Check out the course.
But you've heard it here before. Yeah. So psychedeliceducationcenter.com to learn about our 8-week program and also the Imagination is Revelation course that Johanna put together with Kyle. It's amazing. Really great stuff. Super, super proud of that. All right. So let's dig into some news.
All right.
Your pick on where you want to go first.
What is up first here? I guess we could dive into, maybe we'll just talk about some business stuff first.
Sure.
Let's see. I think I have some other business stuff up that you don't have. Maybe I forgot to drop it in there, but Havn Lifescience, they just announced that they're going to be on the stock exchange as well, under CSE. So we're starting to see some folks also come into the public, which is kind of interesting to see. Now we have that was Compass that was filed the IPO.
So Compass filed initial paperwork to be listed as an IPO, which I think would be the first American company on the exchange. I think. I'm not exactly sure where MindMed is traded. I think they're Canadian.
Yeah, and this is also a Canadian company. Havn.
Yeah, CSE is the exchange, Canadian Securities Exchange, I think.
Yep.
And they're a Vancouver-based company, I believe, that is going to produce psychedelic drugs for clinical trials. That's what I understood it to be, or just basic science research.
Yeah, it says they're a biotechnology company focused on unlocking human potential using evidence-informed research and developing standardized psychoactive compounds derived from plants and fungi. And they're pleased to announce that they're trading on the Canadian Securities Exchange.
Yeah, I think they emailed us their press release the other day. Like, these are the kind of companies I'm super into because they're producing raw materials for research. And there's so many novel ways to do that, right? There was this California company who was genetically modifying yeast to produce all these things. They had some sort of proprietary GE thing where they could just like pump out drugs very cheaply. And this technology is already existing in pharma, but it's just really cool to see it in psychedelics. Any kind of takeaways from Havn?
No, I haven't looked into it extensively, but I just wanted to kind of point that out that, it sounds like there's going to be more bio life science companies kind of popping on that, the public market there. So it's coming, folks. It is coming.
Yeah, it's incredible to see all these new companies come up. Like, I'm really, really curious to see how it works. And the people behind Havn were kind of interesting. One guy had a lot of time in kind of the CBD space, distributing in Canada. And another person, had a really other impressive kind of corporate background. So it's like, I don't know. Interesting. That's all. Strap in.
All right. We also had another update from somebody from Synthesis, sent us this over, Teresa. So psychedelic researcher Dr. Rosalind Watts is joining Synthesis Institute as a clinical director and leads new therapeutic offerings. So Dr. Watts, clinical psychologist, known for her work as a clinical lead of Imperial College London psilocybin for depression study. As Synthesis Institute's new clinical director, Dr. Watts will develop several new therapeutic programs at Synthesis, including a small group psilocybin experiences for people suffering from mental health difficulties, as well as an experiential practitioner training. Using edible truffles containing psilocybin, this new pathway will provide a more supported psilocybin experience with specialist therapeutic support. And it sounds like, their program includes 3 phases, 6 weeks of preparation leading up to a truffle-assisted group therapy in the Netherlands, followed by substantial aftercare and follow-up, and a 12-month integration package to nurture the cultivation and growth of a life worth living. So this is really exciting. I'm kind of excited to hear about this therapy program, and we did kind of get some word of that at Horizons. There was, I forget who was that, Rachel Aiden, CEO of Synthesis, presented at Horizons, kind of talking about this green light that they were going to get for creating a therapy program. And the one thing that I guess excites me about this is just being able to kind of create that container for truffle-assisted therapy, right? So we're, moving away from kind of that psilocybin, synthetic psilocybin pill, and just being able to use a natural product there, could be a lot cheaper down the line. I'm sure, I don't know how this program is going to be funded, but, I really appreciate, a 12-month integration package. That's pretty awesome.
Right. Because what I'm hearing from people who have spent a lot of time at these centers is that integration is typically just a WhatsApp group where people just chat with each other on their phones. Like, not necessarily the day after, but after that, largely it's really lacking in a lot of these places. So it's kind of cool to see that in the business space, this is being offered. Like it's about time, really. Like it should have been offered for a long time, but fiscally people didn't really want that. It was a hard sell, but I think people are now understanding that this is a really big part of the project.
Yeah. I'm wondering what their funding is going to look like for that, or how this, how much this therapy program's going to cost. Yeah.
Right. Which is one of the big problems with the work generally, is like psychedelic work will be expensive. That said, it's cheaper than suffering for 50 years from crippling whatever.
Yeah.
Well, depending on how you value your life, I guess. But I think like the humans should be suffering less than they are now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything that you want to highlight there?
Not really. Best of luck, Synthesis. Like to your point, like it's going to be interesting to see more of a whole plant thing, a whole fungi situation, to compare and contrast. Hopefully they're open with their data, but compare and contrast to the clinical trials using single molecule drugs. So like a whole organism to drug. So that should be interesting. Like, is there, and there's going to be a lot more factors than just plant to drug, right? It's
Right.
Very different setting at synthesis than at a hospital.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes me wonder about accessibility down the line with clinics opening up with like pill form psilocybin versus like what synthesis sounds like they're doing with truffles, and possibly what Oregon's going to be doing with, natural material. So, yeah, just excited that some of those models are popping up instead of it just kind of possibly being very expensive synthetic psilocybin from the lab.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, what we often miss is that there's so many competitive forces at play here. Like, we're feeling it now too. Like, there's so many people coming into the space that is somebody producing psilocybin for like $1,200 a hit. Like, is that actually going to be sustainable long term? Like, I don't think so. I think there's going to be competitive pressures to drop that price. Mm-hmm. What happens if this Havn company starts bringing it down to $6 a session? Or even 70 a session is affordable enough. It's only like double the price of mushrooms, or for an eighth roughly. So, these competitive forces are going to continue to drop prices, and I think that is optimistic for accessibility long term. But realistically, this comes back to the same question: are psychedelics exclusively in the domain of psychiatry? Mm-hmm. Or do they belong elsewhere? Is peer-to-peer use okay? I think yes, but like, how do we as a culture kind of land on that? Like, that's the big question. And, I think a lot of psychiatrists probably agree that people should just be able to use mushrooms when they want to, or LSD when they want to. Others would be vehemently opposed, but there are people in that field that are on our side of like liberation and cognitive liberty and whatnot. So it's there. It's coming, I think. And, competition plays a part.
Yep. Definitely. Cool. What's up next?
So let's jump onto this AWAKN one with Ben Sessa and David Nutt.
Yeah.
So title: AWAKN Life Sciences launches clinical research division with Professor David Nutt and Dr. Ben Sessa, identifying suitable studies across Europe and North America. So quote here from the article. I'll read two quotes. This is from Ben. The world of psychedelic clinical research has been expanding at a staggering pace in recent years. It is unusual research that mostly comes from academic departments with private funding from philanthropic donations or private investors, and a plethora of newly emerging small-scale psychedelic drug development startups, rather than from established pharmaceutical companies. End of quote there. I think that's really important that we see the difference. Like, this is really an aberration, like really deviant from norms of drug development, the whole situation we're dealing with. And further on the quote, our mission at AWAKN is to ensure that research in this field is done ethically, in a timely fashion, and always with a direct focus on bettering patient care and continually driving increased accessibility for the masses. We're also keen on focusing on clinical problems that are significant public health issues, not just rare or unusual psychiatric disorders. That's a big deal too. Like, biggest bang for your buck, like the best for the most people, kind of a utilitarian approach here. Super appreciated. And then furthering, we are hugely excited about this launch of our commercial clinical research division, which enables AWAKN to work in partnership with both for-profit and non-for-profit organizations to push the boundaries of psychedelic science and bring these essential medicines to the vast number of people who can benefit from them in these troubling times. Yeah, it's amazing. Just really happy to see that kind of stuff going on. And with these two, Dr. David Nutt has... in my opinion, impeccable credentials, and same thing with Ben Sessa. Mm-hmm. Like, just an incredible amount of dedication in the field for ages, both of them.
Yeah, it's great to see Ben kind of get this started. So congrats, Dr. Sessa.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to visit the facility once we're safe to do that.
Yeah, and I think I saw on Ben posted somewhere that they were excited to announce they're bringing on Dr. Matthew Johnson from Johns Hopkins on their advisory board too, I believe.
Great.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, so that's another press release. It's kind of nice to be able to jump on these press releases, but it's also kind of goofy. So maybe we'll be able to talk to them both Ben Sessa and David Nutt about it. That would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, we should
hear it from the horse's mouth.
Sessa back on. He's always fun to chat with.
All right. So let's jump into the deep end here, Kyle. The title of this one, Psychedelics Promote Structural and Functional Neural Plasticity. This is a paper. Man, I didn't even see where they were out of. It seems like it's kind of a distributed project. Otherwise, the institution might be really upfront, but I'm going to read this summary of this study. But in short, it's like psychedelics are helping with nerve dendrite density and growth, synaptogenesis, that kind of stuff. So summary here. Atrophy of neurons in the prefrontal cortex plays a key role in the pathophysiology of depression and related disorders. The ability to promote both structural and functional plasticity in the prefrontal cortex has been hypothesized to underlie the fast-acting antidepressant properties of the dissociative anesthetic ketamine. Side note, maybe, but that's kind of a weird thing, right? It's like, your nerves changed, so now you're not depressed anymore. Maybe. But still a hypothesis. So furthering on to the summary again, here we report that like ketamine, serotonergic psychedelics are capable of robustly increasing neuridogenesis and spinogenesis, both in vitro and in vivo. So that means like in real animals and in like petri dishes. These changes in neuronal structure are accompanied by increased synapse number and function as measured by fluorescence microscopy and electrophysiology. The structural changes induced by psychedelics appear to result from stimulation of the TRKB, mTOR, and 5-HT2A signaling pathways and could possibly explain the clinical effectiveness of these compounds. Our results underscore the therapeutic potential of psychedelics and, importantly, identifying several lead scaffolds for medicinal chemistry efforts focused on developing plasticity-promoting compounds as safe, effective, and fast-acting treatments for depression and related disorders. End of summary. Really quick, 5-HT2A is the primary pathway that we talk about for LSD, psilocybin, probably DMT. mTOR that they talked about is related, interestingly, to stuff like intermittent fasting and different diets can manipulate the function of mTOR. And there's a lot around like life extension related to mTOR as well. So does LSD promote life extension? Albert Hoffman lived long enough to make us suspect that, but plenty of people died early in their lives too who are LSD regulars. Yeah. So LSD, DMT, and DOI, it's really interesting they're using DOI, increased dendritic arbor complexity. So dendrites being the things that come off of neurons to help them communicate, and dendritic arbor complexity. So that just means like more of them and like different kinds of like spiking and branching off. Makes me think of X-Men. These cellular effects are similar to those produced by the fast-acting antidepressant ketamine and highlight the potential of psychedelics for treating depression and related disorders. So, I think you pointed out, Kyle, that this is not like in humans, right? This is an animal study. People like me would want to jump to conclusions, go, yeah, for sure. Of course. Like LSD is fairly safe, some mushrooms fairly safe, and people have issues. So why not just like try it? But, that's not the way clinical trials work and ethics work. So it's kind of like challenging. So now we need to probably do this in human populations, which, I don't know. It shouldn't be too hard. You do that in 100 people, one time goes, like you should be fine. I don't know. Did you have any takeaways from this article?
I didn't get through the whole thing, just kind of reading through the summary. It was pretty extensive. But, it's exciting. We do talk about that idea of, psychedelics being able to promote neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. So, more research being done on that to help validate that idea, I think is really important because it really helps validate the treatment options there. We can really kind of understand what's going on and maybe why these substances are working a bit. So again, right, not downplaying the neuroscience and all the stuff like that, because it is important, I think, to really understand like what's going on here in the body and how these substances are working.
Yeah. So looking at the acknowledgements here, is like a lot of different people involved. Looks like they got their animals for this study from Charles River Labs in Boston. There's multiple shout outs to University of California at Davis and the Mind Institute. Yeah, a lot of different people getting a lot of credit here. So this is probably a really big project. And it's really great to see like this much collaboration on a project like this. So I hope this kind of thing continues. I was talking to somebody the other day about a hypothetical kind of traumatic brain injury treatment. I just started finally reading Dr. Dan Engel's concussion repair manual. I didn't realize he was like a hardcore brain injury survivor. And like a lot of this comes from his personal experience. So maybe he covers this in the book, but like, I think like a multifactorial approach of like all these compounds we know that increase dendrite growth, dendritic complexity, and just neuron growth. Like all of these things seem like a great thing to throw in the mix along with traditional treatments like hyperbaric chambers and like puzzles and whatever else. Probably being in community helps. We kind of recorded a bunch about this with Del Jolly from Unlimited Sciences for a future podcast a week or two ago. I went through a lot of this with him and, ketamine, 5-MeO, DMT, regular unleaded DMT, I guess. I don't really know how to call it. And NDMT is kind of a goofy misnomer, but I guess that's what we'll use. And, all these drugs like can help. So like, what if we kind of had some sort of like cyclical rotation of microdosing or like maybe threshold dosing to help over the course of like 2-3 months? Like that would be pretty cool. Perhaps would help a ton. How do you set up the container for that? Hard saying. But I'm meeting a lot of veterans who are self-treating with psychedelics, not necessarily for TBI, but for whatever they're feeling.
And like microdosing or kind of bigger dose, medium dose?
All of it.
Mixture
all of it.
Everything.
Yeah. So like micro, macro, medium, whatever. And they seem to have great results. Like the veterans largely that are using psychedelics, in my opinion, they're doing a lot better than those who aren't.
And are they doing that like the people that you're chatting with kind of in that group peer support, or are they doing it?
They've got a collective of sorts to like help them. I wouldn't say they're doing kind of like ayahuasca style. This is more like Burning Man style,
right.
Or like, typical psychedelic enthusiasts that will do it on a Wednesday, done work, can eat these mushrooms now or eat this acid now. Might be up a little late, but I guess that's fine because I'm not working on Thursday or whatever it is, like it seems like unstructured, but it still seems to help. And this is my observation. It's certainly just that. Like I can't really extrapolate results, but perhaps that's true. Yeah.
And what was that community piece you were pointing to that you mentioned with Del Jolly?
Well, I just think if we're in isolation, like we're probably going to see like brain atrophy.
Totally. If
we're in community, we're going to see heightened neural activity and perhaps the brain will come back alive with the heightened neural activity.
Yeah.
I remember hearing somebody recently talk about a visit to the actor, singer Jamie Foxx's house. And, super rich, right? But he's got at least 20 people in the house at all times. And perhaps that's how like some high performers do so well, is that they're just always around folks. You got to be kind of an extrovert to want that, I guess. But
right.
I can imagine, like I remember when I had a lot of roommates, it was a really kind of a fun time.
Yeah.
It was really nice to not ever be lonely, really. You always had people to hang out with and do stuff with and talk about things with. And it was just a very different lifestyle. So
that's super important.
I'm wondering.
Yeah, go.
Are nuclear families toxic? Like, is the concept of a nuclear family one of the major factors at play here? Not everybody has one even,
right.
But, even if you do, it's not like you come out clean.
Right.
So like, perhaps there's something about transcending this idea of nuclear families to boost life satisfaction and health and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I always kind of come back to Lenny's phrase here when we talk about group process being the descendants of successful tribes. And the book that really kind of turned me on to, I guess, this idea of group process and the healing aspect of relationships and kind of understanding the impact that relationships have on brain growth and just mental health in general. It's a book called The Neuroscience of Human Relationships, Attachment, and the Developing Social Brain by Louis Cozolino. Really great. I went through it in one of my classes based on somatics, and really, really interesting, take on the brain as a social organ, and it really thrives off relationships and how we just really need relationships to survive. And I mean, I think what we're seeing now, especially with like COVID and people in isolation and the increase in, mental health disorders on the rise right now. And, is that due to not having a lot of in-person relationships? And I was just chatting with somebody recently about this, about how people are taking like all sorts of different approaches. There's the people that just want to go out and hang out with large groups, and that feels completely safe because they need that, and kind of like doing that risk analysis of like, I just need to be around people for my own sanity and I'll take that risk, versus like, then on the other side of like this safety, it's like, I don't want to be around anybody because I'm, afraid about,
I know people that haven't left the house in 5 months.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the impact that's going to have on those folks. It's really scary.
Yeah. And, I've been trying to be really cautious, not having a spleen. And then there's days where I'm like, I just need to go hang out with a friend, somebody that's not my family. It's like, so I get it. It's like, all right, well, here's a risk factor that I'll take into consideration because I need some sort of other relationship. And that's super important for my health,
It's huge to consider. Like, what are the long-term impacts of isolation? Like, we know that like solitary confinement in prisons is not okay. Like it's actual torture. So like by being alone at home, like even though you have the internet, is there something similar going on there? Yeah. On the flip side, like silly behavior in groups that I've seen people since the pandemic sharing drinks, sharing pipes to smoke weed, like all sorts of like weird shit. I've had to do some harm reduction talks. Like, hey, Mitch Gomez taught me this one. Don't share nose drugs with people that you wouldn't regularly feel safe having unprotected sex with. And I know the people that are doing cocaine and a lot of ketamine, they're doing it with people that they don't really trust at that level, but they're still like sharing nose tools with each other. It's like, not good, people. Great way to transmit all sorts of things. Yeah. Or receive, not even transmit. Like it's not the best. So, there's impacts all over. It's just, how do we do this calculus for ourselves? Like, I know that there's people doing ayahuasca in groups now. Still think that's a little goofy. I don't really think that's the best move, but I know people are doing it. There's a lot of retreat centers opening back up and like trying to get things going. It's like, the virus, like the tests aren't that great. Like there's asymptomatic people that won't show temperatures that are transmitting like crazy. I know multiple people in the hospital. I know I've got doctor friends that have seen a lot of people die from COVID. It's just like insane to me what's going on and how people are responding. But, we can still get together in person and be relatively safe, right? Yeah. So like, how do we mitigate risks and do a service to ourselves? That's the calculus that's really hard for us to work out. I've certainly taken a number of risks, but I'm not sharing pipes with people. I'm not sharing drinks with people. I'm staying away from people when I can, all that. So, yeah. Cool. Well, anything else on this BDNF kind of topic?
No, I think we can move on to another article.
Cool. So next one here, folks at Field Trip released an app called Trip. The mobile app is designed to expand your mind. It's the headline on greenentrepreneur.com. So essentially, the folks at Field Trip decided to make an app that helps guide people in their psychedelic sessions. We put out our books and our materials to do something similar, right? Like people can buy our books and like help them prep for an experience, integrate it, all that kind of stuff, and like have a sitter there that's helpful. These folks at Field Trip decided to address the same situation. Like there's people out there just taking these things and doing whatever they do. And how could they be of service? And they decided to make an app that people can listen to and work with. It sounds like they kind of fine tune how long are you going to be tripping for? What are your intentions? Stuff like that. I don't know how I feel about it overall. I feel like it's kind of like enabling a lot more risky behavior, maybe. But on the same hand, it is also doing harm reduction. Yeah. Like people need some sort of guidance and help. And people are going to be doing this anyway, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a really, again, a difficult balance of cognitive liberty to harm reduction to, promoting dangerous things. Largely, I'm good with it. Who knows? I might try it someday and report back, but preference is to have a high-end facilitator, but they're not always available. Sometimes they're booked up for 2 years.
Yep. Yeah, and I guess a question that would come up for me, it's like encouraging substance use. Like, I guess what would be the difference between like an app like this versus like the book that we provide, right? Like I've definitely felt that way having that out there. It's like, ooh, like I'm definitely not encouraging use, but it's like if you're doing it anyways, at least here's a resource. But I don't know, maybe it's different when it feels like it's an app, and I don't know. And I don't know. The app thing is always interesting. It's like, what type of information are they collecting? Like, obviously, with a book, we're not collecting any information. You have that, and you can burn it, get rid of it, whatever you want to do to it. But with an app, it's like, yeah, what type of information is getting collected there? Maybe how are they using that? That's what gets me a little weird about app developments with some of this stuff. Just the privacy.
Right. Like, are you? Yeah. There's a lot there. And there's a lot to consider. But realistically, we're going to be seeing more of this. I'm almost surprised this is one of the first major apps we've seen. Like what's Mendel Kalin's company called again? Do you remember?
Something Wave.
The music thing.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I've been really wanting to get into his work a lot, but it's, it's a little tough. Because he's been trying to make something that's, pretty damn perfect, I think. I think he even worked with Brian Eno from Talking Heads to develop his app. Yeah, Mindwave, Brainwave, something like that.
That's what I keep thinking. It's Mindwave.
Sorry, Mendel. It's an amazing looking project. It's just hard for me to get a grip on like what it does and how it helps.
Wave paths. That's it.
Wave paths. That's right.
Kind of off.
So like,
but
right, we're almost there. It's like that could be wrapped up in an app too. Like, is it the same thing? Like, maybe he's more of an independent company than something like Field Trip, so maybe we feel more comfortable with it. I think there's something possibly there, like overlapping. So like, a small company we feel okay about, and a big company we feel a little uncomfortable about. And I think that's kind of normal in the space, right? Like the reactions against Compass were pretty extreme for a while. And now it's like they're not even the big dogs in the space anymore.
Right. Yeah, there's new people popping on.
Yeah, like very regularly it's shifting and developing in interesting ways. So we just have to kind of contextualize these things appropriately. I'd love to have some sort of relationship with Field Trip or Ronan just to like understand what they're doing. But, we don't have that yet. So maybe in time, Ronan, have your people call my people. Set something up. Yeah. So I think that's pretty good on that app. And then finally, from sciencealert.com, psychedelic trips really are similar to religious experiences in many ways. So first paragraph here, just to help. A growing body of drug research has shown that experiences with psychedelic drugs can be both positive and negative, scary and uncomfortable for some, but leading to improvements in well-being and relationships for others. These substances also show promising early results for treating mental health disorders in controlled doses. Yeah, so it seems like this group used self-reporting measures around the MEQ 30 mystical experience questionnaire. And this is in Finland, right? The study made use of a Finnish translation of the 30 question MEQ. Yep. So that's kind of cool. And I want to know how they got like standard religious experience stuff going here. Like, how did they have a control for like religious experiencers outside of the psychedelic space? Or did they just like say, okay, MEQ is there, so therefore like MEQ comes from the Bible or whatnot. So therefore it's like the MEQ.
I think they were just using the MEQ, and they provided that among 288 people reporting on their first time using psychedelics.
Right. If I look back to my first psychedelic experience, it was it could have been textbook like religious literature,
right?
For a lot of reasons, right? Like, yeah. So makes sense to me. And it's kind of interesting that they wanted to take this attack, but I guess the most interesting thing is that this is happening in Finland, and we're seeing it expand like far beyond just America and England and Canada. Mm-hmm. So it's really awesome. Like I'm stoked on that.
Yeah,
and I think perhaps what it also shows is you don't have to do like laboratory work to get good findings all the time.
Yeah, this was published in the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs. And it sounded like it was just a survey study. So just using the revised mystical experience questionnaire and just sending it out. So this is what they came up with. And in the one article, they did link to the MEQ 30. So you can kind of go in there and get a sense of, you know, what it is. So like factor 1 is looking at mystical, some of the things in there, experience of the fusion of your personal self into a larger whole, experience of unity with ultimate reality, feelings that you experienced eternity or infinity, and you're rating that from 0 to 5. The second factor would be positive mood, experience of amazement, feelings of tenderness and gentleness, feelings of peace and tranquility. The third factor, transcendence of time and space, so loss of your usual sense of time, loss of your usual sense of space, loss of usual awareness of where you are, sense of being outside of time, beyond past and future. And then the fourth factor here is ineffability, so the sense that the experience cannot be described adequately in words, feeling that you cannot do justice to your experience by describing it in words, and so on. And I obviously didn't read through all the questions there, but it kind of gives you a sense of what type of questions they're asking.
Right. And for those who don't really know the history, this is what was used in the Good Friday experiments with like Walter Pankey, Tim Leary, Ram Dass, Houston Smith, I think was also involved back then. And the questionnaire had to be created back then. So they said, what in classical mystical literature seems to make up a mystical experience? Like, what are the qualities? And that's how they made the measure to begin with. And it's pretty cool. I'm just happy they did that. And that was how Doblin kind of like, one of Doblin's first public things was like revisiting those findings 20, 30 years later or whatever it was, maybe even longer. I don't know the name of that, but he also did that while he was at Harvard, I think. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's a really classic experiment that people should know about. It's like, I think they administered psilocybin to, might have been LSD, but I think it was psilocybin, to a number of like seminary students, I believe. And so like people training to be priests who are really into religion. Good Friday,
I think it was psilocybin.
Psilocybin, yeah. Like it's a lot more of a rational pick. Yeah. It's a lot shorter. And, you know, the idea was, can we reliably recreate mystical experiences in people? I think we've landed on yes, that we can. You know, as a psychedelic movement, we think that we can. Mm-hmm. And, you know, did you read the Rick Strassman book?
Which one?
Something about the voice of prophecy.
No, I didn't.
It's kind of new.
I did not read that one. I read his other books, DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and then it was kind of like a compilation of different essays, but I think he was either the editor or like main author on there. was it Inner Paths to Outer Space or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
That was the book I think that actually turned me on to transpersonal psychology.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that was a pretty influential book for a lot of folks. Yeah. This book is called DMT and the Soul of Prophecy, a new science of spiritual revelation in the Hebrew Bible. So like in Old Testament thought, a lot of religious stuff was just spoken through individuals, right? Like it's kind of an interesting shift. Like we don't really have that in modern psychedelic culture. Like as far as I'm concerned, like you, Kyle, have a DMT trip and want to like start telling me everything and how it should be gospel. Like we don't really have that. Like that's not really how a lot of us relate. It's like, oh, well, that must have been really meaningful and that's really cool. And so I'll simmer on it.
Right.
It's not like your experience doesn't make it like the definitive authority that you can now universalize to all people.
Right.
Because I think that's a little dangerous, right?
And I mean, there's people that have tried to do that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's like the essence of like, in my opinion, I read Rick Strassman's book, DMT and the Soul of Prophecy. And like, I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, Rick. Like he kind of thinks that we could revert back to that as being an interesting way of doing religion for the future. And I'm like, that's a really kind of complicated deal. Like, how do we bring prophecy back? It's like, I don't know. Like perhaps it's a group of 20 rabbis that try to get these things and work it out and then share it.
Right.
You know, I don't really know how that would work or how we would have like sensible things, you know.
What would even be open to that culturally, right? I mean, if somebody, you know, we tend to push people away when they kind of bring prophecy up. And as a culture, are we willing to even accept some of that at this point?
Like it's dangerous, right? So I think what this book kind of came from was I don't know if you read this, but Rick Strassman had some critiques of a lot of the current psychedelic research, you know, more from like a Jewish background. So like, should psychedelic sessions use music that was celebrated in Nazi Germany, like Wagner, you know, Flight of the Valkyries, things like that. And, you know, nods to anti-Semitic composers. Like the European classical music tradition has lots of anti-Semites in it. Lots. So like, should a Jewish person or should psychedelic research in general be using those tracks? Because what if you're triggered in a session and be like, oh, okay, like you're totally missing that, like a lot of my ancestors were exterminated by this group. You know, it's kind of like just a glimmer of, you know, controversy before the Black Lives Matter thing picked up.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think he got much press with that. And I had, you know, I'm sympathetic to that from the music production perspective, but you know, what's the alternative? You know, I think studying holotropic breathwork and understanding that music component a lot better would be helpful because you're not just relying on, you know, the tracks from Hopkins or whatnot.
Right.
You can make your own and not use European music.
And I think maybe a little education around, you know, who some of those composers are. And I mean, just even trying to think about that, I don't think I would know off the top of my head. Maybe I hear a piece, I'm like, oh, it sounds interesting. But now I guess you have me thinking like, oh, maybe I should do some research when I put some music playlists together about who some of these composers are and whatnot.
Right. Like we should know who Wagner is. Wagner was like, I don't think he was a Nazi, but he was like definitely kind of an ideologue that Hitler kind of leveraged, like this kind of German idealism fantasy about the Übermensch and all that junk. And yeah, like it's a really tough thing though too, Kyle, because like a lot of the Christian tradition in Europe was explicitly anti-Semitic. Like a lot of people were Jewish in Europe, but had to hide it. I think they call them crypto Jews, which is a historical term used in a lot of books. And yeah, it's just a really, really tough thing, like scapegoated for years and years and years. They were the problem, right. You know, like it's crazy to me that persisted for so long, but it did. I guess people really like having scapegoats. It's kind of a natural deal, unfortunately, but it's a big deal. But yeah, how do we solve that? I don't know. Perhaps understand that we can be sensitive to it. Perhaps leverage some Jewish composers. There's some amazing classical music by Jewish composers. Yeah. And, just straight up Jewish music. There's some amazing traditional Jewish music that could be used in sessions. I don't know that would be the best for people who grew up in that tradition, but people who didn't, could be really helpful.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I'll have to check that article out. You drop it in the show notes.
The Rick Strassman critique. Yeah, I'll try to remember that. Yeah. So, overall, I wasn't a huge fan of his DMT and the Soul of Prophecy, but I understood what he was doing. It just didn't move me as being kind of a student of religion and mysticism for so long. It was I get why we need to be sensitive to the Jewish tradition, but it's I don't know that we can universalize it.
Did he revise any of his DMT theories in that book, or do any updates?
Well, perhaps. I don't remember. It was kind of a couple of years ago that I read it. It came out in 2015, I think. But he has been pretty explicit that the DMT pineal gland thing is just that, a hypothesis. It's not, it's not proven. There are ways to prove it, but he's it's just a hypothesis. And it's based on a huge tradition of, even Rene Descartes thought it was the link between mind and God.
Right.
Self and God. And this is a long-standing European deal. So yeah, why wouldn't science at least kind of go, oh, okay, in history, they thought this was the case. Perhaps it's the case. Maybe it still is the case, but does it have to produce DMT to do that, to be the function?
Right.
I don't think that's the case. Somebody on our Facebook group recently was it might not be the case that DMT is coming out of the pineal gland. That makes my whole thing way less magical. Then I was why? Why do you need a chemical correlate to have your thing be magical and amazing?
Yeah, I was a huge believer in this, and it really kind of helped me get a basis of a lot of this work. Having that near-death experience, stumbling across Strassman's work, and then kind of doing my own hypothesis about psilocybin possibly being this early active DMT, and then trying to make that correlation between, that psilocybin experience felt like death. And, I was able to relive that experience. And okay, so if I had this endogenous release of DMT while I was dying, and, I could get back to that certain state through tryptamine compound, then okay, I don't know, this is starting to make sense. And to me, that was exciting. It was I was able to kind of put some sort of theory together about why or what was going on there when I was kind of slipping away. But, I've tried to think a little bit more critically about this, and hearing different perspectives, and hearing Strassman come out. I remember I saw him at the show, the whole opening for DMT, the Spirit Molecule movie at COSM. And that was one of the first things he said when he got on stage was this was a hypothesis. We don't have any real data about this, but everybody took it as truth. And, now they kind of start off with DMT as the thing that's, produced when you die, when you're born, during dreams, and all this stuff. And I think for most people, it kind of has this nice mythos to it. It kind of makes it exciting. And then just hearing Dr. David Nichols present at Breaking Convention, and you can check that out on YouTube. He's got a wonderful talk kind of arguing against that and saying, there's so many other neurotransmitters and chemical reactions going on in the brain when, somebody is going through a near-death experience that, could produce these states as well. And so it's yeah, I don't know. It's definitely interesting.
Video is titled DMT and the Pineal Gland, Facts versus Fantasy. Yeah. So that'll be in the show notes as well. Yeah, it's super important. And it's important to even just explore this idea, you can have a mystical experience. DMT doesn't necessarily need to be involved at all. Does that take away from the value for you? If so, why? Are you fetishizing DMT? There's a lot of other drugs out there that do amazing things. Your brain is an amazing thing. The human psyche is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Why not fetishize the highest thing, which is psyche and its relation to the universe,
Yeah.
Psyche generally, right? Can't kind of really put anyone out. unless you're going like, I'm God, but you also are God. That kind of a deal. Yeah, it's tricky. It's really tricky. Or do we not fetishize anything whatsoever? Like get really zen about things. Like, what did Lenny say the other day? I look over at that hillside filled with trees and I don't see sin. Like I don't see any problems over there.
Yeah.
So it's like, a lot of it's just kind of like future worry, past worry, anxiety generally. And it's like, the observer just living or something, or just being. Yeah. I don't know if that's too much of a tangent, but so we're at about an hour, Kyle. Where do we want to go?
I know you might have wanted to touch on this Biden thing really quickly, but I don't know if you wanted to touch on that or start wrapping up.
Just really briefly. So there's a lot more publicity coming out about Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, having used ibogaine for treatment, I think in 2014 maybe, in Mexico. He's, pretty publicly had a lot of like drug and alcohol problems. So the fact that somebody with that kind of prominence in the elite world, like having that kind of treatment and having people publicly know about it, I think that's a big deal. It's like, oh, what if like half of the Trump family had like different psychedelic treatments? Probably doesn't look to be that way, but like when that many I'm just saying, what does it look like when that happens? Like it's interesting when more and more famous people have these things. I think the tides are going to continue to shift in terms of public opinion, drug policy, and more. So I think it's a good thing. I think it's a little, we might hear about it over the next couple of months as the election kind of spins up.
And was that a recent article? I didn't check the date on that.
I think so. I think it was within the last couple of weeks. Some UK news site will link to it in the article. Like, I don't know. Like overall, like I think the article is trying to make a hit piece. It's like somebody has drug and alcohol problems. Like, and you're going to try to sensationalize that. Like you're voting in, who are you voting for? Are you voting for the person with the addiction problems or their parent, Yeah. So it's very different.
Okay. It came out August 22nd, 2020. So yeah, pretty recent.
Yeah. And I don't know that this is even new news, right? Like I think it's been somewhat public knowledge for a bit. So yeah. I'm just excited for more famous people to come out with their stories about healing through psychedelics. There's probably a lot of actors in Hollywood who have used iboga and other psychedelics to treat their psychiatric disorders, be it substance use disorder or whatever else.
Right. It'd be interesting too to see if Joe Biden, depending on, I guess, like Hunter's outcome with ibogaine, like if he would change his stance on it. I mean, because, we know that Biden was pretty wrapped up with the whole RAVE Act and whatnot and pretty hard on the war on drugs and whatnot. So I don't know. It'd be interesting.
The statement he made the other day was that he doesn't think users should have penalties.
Oh, wow.
Like legal penalties. I was on Twitter. That said, he did say that people should have mandatory treatment, which I think is not correct. But, it's probably a politically popular thing to say, and that's what these people do. Yeah. Cool. So progress. It's always moving. Hopefully we survive. All right. So let's wrap it up. Again, if you want to help us out, you can leave us a small monthly donation starting at $2 a month at patreon.com/psychedelics today. We would love for you to tell some friends about the show. Send them your favorite episode. Maybe send them like one of our free classes. I'm sure you know people who are using psychedelics but don't necessarily have the education that you might prefer them to have. So send them our way. And we've got, again, Imagination as Revelation, a class on psychedelics and Carl Jung. Kyle helped Johanna. How do we say her whole name? Johanna Hilla Sopranen or something like that?
Yeah, I always
She's
just
from
say
Finland.
Hilla. Yeah.
Johanna Hilla. Yeah. She goes by a lot of things. So thank you, Johanna, for joining us and helping us build that. It's an amazing class. It's our highest production quality to date on our classes. And I hope we can just keep improving and offering more classes. That's at Psychedelic Education Center. And also starting September 17, we kick off an 8-week program for clinicians and therapists where we give you a solid foundation for your future in psychedelics. You can decide if you want to be more involved, how you want to be involved, and we help you really get a handle on theory and some practice, some practical aspects around it. So if you want to check that out, psychedelic-education-center.com. We'd love for you to join us. Probably 10 spots left total in our 7 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Mountain time slot class, which is perfect for folks in Australia too. So feel free to join us, folks. Cool. Anything else?
No, thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next week.
All right. Take care, everybody. See you next time.